We're in Daf Nun Tes Amid Base.
Good morning.
6 lines from the bottom. Again, to see the Mishnah had said that one of the piece of jewelry that they may not wear in Rosh Hashanah is a ring. So the Gemara is going to try and figure out what kind of ring are we talking about. What are we talking about? So it says, and not a ring that has no chesem, has no signet. The reason, if it has no signet on it, so then it's a jewelry. It is really jewelry and is permissible to essentially counts as a garment that is permissible to be worn. However, you're going to be exempt. You're going to be it's asam in the Rabbanan on account of that. You may take it off and show it, but really it is a garment. But if it has a signet on it, if it's a signet ring, then it actually isn't even a garment, and it'll be asar midoraisa, and there's a chatas to be brought. Amalav tachshetu, which tells me that a signet ring is not a piece of jewelry. For a minute, we have a contradiction. Tachshite nashim tameim. They say in order for something to be tamei, it has to be a vessel, and tachshite nashim, jewelry that a woman's jewelry, are going to be tamei, meaning they are susceptible to tumah, and they are a vessel. And here's a list of women's jewelry that would count in this. Katalaos, which we saw was this choker, nizamim, nose rings, tabaos, and rings. Now the Mishnah explains, so Bryce explains. What the Mishnah explains. What are these rings? With tabas, bein sheyesh alechosim mishein alechosim. That when we said rings, regardless of whether it's a signet ring or not, v'nizmei af, and when we said nose ring, and also a nose ring. So we see that these are susceptible to tumah. These count as rings, these count as jewelry, vessels, and it's susceptible to tumah. And it makes no distinction, or clearly says there is no distinction between whether or not it's a signet ring or a regular ring. So we see that they are both susceptible to tumah, and therefore it should be both be a vessel as a tachshit, as a piece of jewelry, and if it's a piece of jewelry, you're allowed to wear it on Shabbos. So that's the question. The Gemara is going to give us several answers as a distinction between these two. Amar Rabbi Zeira. Rabbi Zeira says actually it's a machlokes, like Kashya Rabbi Nechemia Harabanan. That there's a machlokes between Rabbi Nechemia and Rabbanan how to look at what is the primary definition of a ring. Or really, it's not just a ring, about any functional item. What defines its primary use or its primary material based on its primary use? Amar Rabbi Zeira l'kash Rabbi Nechemia Rabbanan. The Tani we learned. Hisha mateches v'chesama shel almug. If the ring itself is a metal and the signet is of made of wood, so tamei, it's going to be susceptible to tumah because it is a piece of metal. He shall almug v'chesama shel mateches. However, if it's vice versa, it's the other way around. You have a metal a signet, but the ring itself is made of wood, even if it's a nice wood and is a jewelry, but nevertheless, tahara is susceptible. It's not susceptible to tumah. It's tahara on account of that the ring itself is not a receptacle. It's a flat piece of wood, and as such, it is not a pshutek lietz is not susceptible to tumah, and it's not going to be tummy, even though that the signet is made of metal. But that's not the primary thing. This is a ring, and the ring part is made of wood, of a non-receptacle wood. However, Rabbi Nechemia says no, it's tamei. Shahaya Rabbi Nechemia Omer, because Rabbi Nechemia says, and he's going to give a list of items that its susceptibility to tuma is based upon what we look at as the primary section of the item. Shahaya Rabbi Nechemia Omer, because Rabbi Nechemia said, "B'tabas halecha chesama." By a ring, you go by the signet. And if the signet is metal, it's susceptible to tumah. If the signet is wood, it's not susceptible to tumah. I'm always going to look at the engraved or protrusion of the ring, which gives you the functionality of it. That's what's going to define whether it's metal or wood. Ba'ol haloich acher simulonov. And by a yoke, we're going to go based on the simulonov. So Rashi explains the yoke. You have a yoke that runs a piece of wood that runs on the back of the ox, and what keeps the ox in place is these two rods that go along the side of the neck and stick through the piece of wood, and that's the simulonov. So even though the wood is just a flat piece of wood and is not susceptible to tumah, but since the metal, if that is a metal rod that goes through, the peg that goes through, and not a wood peg, so as a metal peg, it'll be susceptible to tumah, even though that the yoke itself, meaning the weight on the necks of the oxen, are of wood. It'll be susceptible to tumah on account of the metal that's there. And bikulav, and they would have another. The kulov is basically a display, where a seller would have in front of a shop a display rack. Okay, it's not a rack. It's basically this beam that was angled towards the narrower on the top and wider on the bottom, and it would have pegs on it, and it would display his items, his wares in front of a shop on it. So if the pegs that are on it are metal, even though that the beam itself, even though the stand itself is made of wood and non-receptacle, therefore not susceptible to tumah. But if the pegs are metal, so then it is susceptible to tumah, because again, the functional aspect of this is going to be the pegs, and therefore, if the pegs are metal, it's susceptible to tumah. We are now on 60a on Samach Hamad Aleph. Besulam halacha shlivosa.
Is this a bit like schach? That you can't have metal attaching the schach?
Related, but not like over there in schach. We're talking about a maimed. That's what supports it. We'll see that soon that the chachamim say you go by the maimed. This is the opposite, really. Over here, it's not what's supporting it. It's actually what you're using. By schach, the metal can't be what supports it. Yeah. But it's the same. The concept is related, but in the opposite. Besulam, by a ladder, you go by the steps as opposed to the two side beams. Arsa, by a scale, what we know as what the justice symbol scale is, two sides, a center beam, a cross beam on top, and two weights on either side. So he says, so there you're going to go by the metal that holds up either tray on either side. So these metal chains here are what define whether it's tamei or not. And since this is metal, even if the rest of it is all wood, we're going to say that it's susceptible to tumah because this vessel is metal. The Chachamim say kol holach acher hamamid. No, you always go by the mamid and whatever is holding the other up. So over here, in a scale, the center beam is the mamid. That's what's holding it up, and so therefore that would define it. And if this is wood, it's not susceptible to tumah. If it's metal, it's susceptible to tumah. By the ladder, it's the two side beams that the steps are placed into, and by the display stand. The stand is metal; it's going to be susceptible to tumah. The wood, it's wood; it's not susceptible to tumah. By the yoke, since the cross beam is wood, it's not susceptible to tumah. And so to here, by a ring, if the ring itself is wood, it's not susceptible to tumah. Rava, so that distinction, Rabbi Zera answers the distinction between our Mishnah and the Mishnah there is one is the Rabbanan and one is the Chachamim. One is the Chachamim, one is Rabbi Nechemia. According to Rabbi Nechemia, it's going to be based on whether or not the signet is metal, and that's going to define it as a piece of jewelry or not. And according to the Chachamim, it's going to be based upon the wood itself. Rava Amar, the ring itself. I mean. So Rava Amar, let's start in Ketani. Rava says actually in this Mishnah that says these are the rings that are going to be susceptible to tumah, both whether it has a signet or not, is not talking about the same case. It's whether it has a signet or not, it can be susceptible to tumah, depending on whether it's a man's ring or a woman's ring. Yesh alachosam, if it's a signet ring, tachshet de ish, then it is jewelry if it belongs to a male, if it's a men's ring, because men would wear signets. Ein alachosam, but if it does not have a signet on it, tachshet de isha, that's a woman's ring, and it'll be susceptible to tumah as a woman's ring. Rav Nachman Yitzchak says similarly that it's talking about two different things, and he says, but you can't compare the two. Tumah Shabbos Karamis. You're comparing Shabbos to Tumah. Tumah Klimasa Marachmana. By Tumah, anything that has it has to be a vessel that does action, that does function. Ukliu, and therefore, regardless of whether or not it has a signet, it's going to be a vessel. Shabbos, Mashumasui. Shabbos, the problem is whether you're carrying something. So, if it doesn't have a signet on it, then it is a functional piece of jewelry, and therefore you're allowed to carry it. If it has a chosam, if it has a signet, you can't carry it. And so in Shabbos, it's going to depend on whether it is something that you would wear during the weekday as a piece of jewelry and not just use it in its function as a stamp, as something that would give your symbol on it. So therefore, the question of Shabbos versus the question of Tumah is not going to be connected. And Tues points out that either way, you're still going to have to define that it's a vessel. And for when we talk about Shabbos, we're talking about a ring that does not have signet. It's going to be jewelry for a woman, and the kli masa, the one that has a signet, is going to be a functional use for a man, and that's why he wears it. Either way, let's dad in Ketani, the Mishnah over there that says that it's tummy, regardless of whether it has a signet or not, is not necessarily talking about the same person wearing that ring. The Mishnah continues and says, she can't go out with a machat, which is a ring that has a ring that has a pin that has no hole on it. A pin that has no hole. So the Gemara says, "Lamai chazia." What function does a pin that has no hole on it serve? Amar Rav Yosef Hoyle Isha Geres B'Sa'ara. So Rashi and Tues have very different directions here. Rashi says, Geres Sa'ara is she binds her hair in a bun and puts the pin through it so that it keeps it together, and then she tucks that under her head covering, and so that's the way to gather her hair in there. Tues says that what she does is this pin is the way she tightens her head net that keeps her hair in place so that it not fall out. Amalei Abaye. So Abaye says, "V'tehava kebiris," which is tahara, v'tishtari. It should be like a biris. The way they would keep their stockings up was that they would have a band at the top of the stocking, which was a sort of a jewelry, but it was a band, a bracelet, as you would, if you would, that sat on top of the stocking and kept it up, and that would never be taken off in the street, and so therefore you're allowed to wear that on Shabbos, and it had a function. It had a functional use, so you would never pull it out.
A garter.
Sorry?
A garter.
That's what that ring is called?
Yeah.
Fantastic. So a garter. And so since it's not really a piece of jewelry, it is a functional it's a functional ring, so it works like it has the halacha of a ring that we said it was on a vessel. It's not in and of itself a vessel, and is also not susceptible to tumah. Tessus asks, what relevance does this have to a pin in your hair? Therefore, Tessus goes with the interpretation that it's there to tighten the head covering, the head net, as opposed to it holds the hair together and tucks it in. In any case, it should be permissible. Ella, because you'll never take it off, and so too over here with the hair, she'd never take that out of her hair in the middle of the street to show it to anyone. Ella Tergama Ravada Narsha, Kame Rav Yosef, in front of Yosef, he explained, since a woman uses it to the pin end to make her part in her hair, and so therefore it's used to comb the hair in a certain way, and it will not, it has a function. But that's done on the weekday. On Shabbos, what function does it have? Tosfos says he doesn't know why Rashi says you couldn't do this on a weekday, on Shabbos. Is it because they didn't, or because you wouldn't be allowed to? And if so, what would be the prohibition? So therefore, again, Tosfos has a different interpretation in this Gemara. So Ubeshabbos l'may chazia. So in Shabbos, what would you do? What function does it have? Amar Rava. So Rava says Tas shel zav yesh la arosha. It has a gold end at its at the other end of the pin, where it would serve as a brooch for the hair. So tashel zav yeshla arisha b'chol chalekas basara. So in the weekday, she uses the pin side as to part her hair, and on Shabbos, b'Shabbos minichasa kaneged badachta, and on Shabbos she sticks the pin into her hair, and the gold part sits as a piece of jewelry on her forehead. The Mishnah further says what other things may not be worn. A man may not walk out with a sandal that has screws or nails to hold the sole together to the top, and the nails sticking out essentially are cleats, and therefore dangerous. And the Gemara is going to explain why that. What was the danger, and how many of these nails. We'll see an interesting idea about when an enactment is made as a response to a particular story, that it's only in the manner that that story happened. You can't go out with one shoe if you have no wound. If you have a wound, it makes sense that you wear on your leg. So then you're going to wear one shoe, either we'll see to protect the leg that has the wound, or on the other leg, because the one that has the wound you can't put a shoe on. But if you have none, so walking out with one is a problem, either because people are going to make fun of the fact that you have only one shoe, so you're going to take it off. Or the Yerushalmi says the reason is because people are going to suspect you for carrying the other shoe under your coat. V'lebet tefillin, you can't wear tefillin in the public domain because it's not obligated on Shabbos, we'll see, and therefore you're carrying. V'lebet kameya, and not with the amulet. Bizman she'ein min mumcha, if it doesn't come from an experienced amulet writer. V'lebet shiryam, v'lebet kasta, v'lebet magafayim, and not with various forms of armor. And if you did, there's not chatas. In other words, it's not really carrying because you are wearing it. After all, it's just that it's not typical to be worn, and it's people are going to suspect that you're going to battle on Shabbos, and therefore you can't wear your armor. So Gemara now addresses, for the rest of the daf, the Gemara is going to address this idea of sandal hamasuma, the sandal that has pegs through it and basically screws or nails through it to hold the top and bottom together, and are dangerous. It is dangerous. So my time, what's the reason? Shmuel shalfi gezerah. It's because of the people running away from the decree that was made by the Romans not to study Torah. And there's three versions of what the story was. The first version is that they were they were hiding in a cave. And they said, anybody that wants can come in, but nobody can go out, because if you go out, they're going to find where they're going to trace us. One of them that was coming in had a shoe backwards. Either he was walking backwards, or his shoe was on backwards. Either way, this sandal that had the pegs showed them that somebody's shoe print was facing the other way. So they thought one of them left, and they got afraid. We will be discovered, and that the enemies will have caught them. At any moment they're going to come and catch them. So they started, a stampede started. And they killed each other in this stampede. Even more than the enemies got to them. Rabbi Elazar and Elazar says that the story was they were in a cave. And they heard footsteps on top of the cave, walking above them on the ground. And whether it was they heard footsteps and they themselves had these nailed pegs, or they heard the nailed pegs being walked on above them. In any case, they thought the enemy was coming. They stampeded, and they killed each other more than what the enemy got to them. And Rabbi says, no, they weren't in a cave. It was actually in the shul itself. And they heard a tumult behind the shul. And they thought it was the enemy that came to catch them. And they stampeded each other. And they ended up killing them their own in the stampede more than the enemies actually did. At that moment, they said, a person should not walk out wearing a this shoe, the sandal that is screwed together or nailed together because the nails are sticking out, and it is dangerous. So Gemara says, wait, if that's the case, what connection is it to Shabbos? Why only on Shabbos? It should be prohibited all week long. The Gemara says, well, the story happened on Shabbos, and therefore they prohibit it only on Shabbos. So the Gemara says, B'yantiv l'shuri. Well, then, if that's the case, even Yantiv should be permissible. Alama Tunan, why did we learn? And we turn to Samach Hamid Beis, that that in regards to sending vessels to someone on Shabbos, so you're sending a package, that has to be something that's non-muktzah. And the sandal amasumar, this nailed sandal, and a shoe that isn't properly sewn together are not allowed to be sent on Yantiv because they are muksa, because it's not an item that can be used. So you see that at Yantiv. On Yantiv, it's a non-functional item, meaning you're not allowed to wear it on Yantiv either. If you tell me this story with the stampede happened on Shabbos, so only Shabbos should be prohibited. So Gemara says, wait, no. The reason of Shabbos is because that's when people gather. Large crowds gather in shul on Shabbos, and therefore it's prohibited. But Yantif nami eke kenufia. Well, Yantif also has kenufia. There's people gathering, and therefore it's also prohibited then. What about Tanis Tzibur? What about a fast day? Also, people come to shul eke kenufia litzer, and it should be prohibited even on a fast day. We don't find that. So Maisa kihava be kenufia di surah hacha kenufia de teirab. Says no. The comparison is that the story that happened on a gathering when it was prohibited to work. On a fast day, you're allowed to work. Yontif, you're not allowed to work. Shabbos, you're not allowed to work. So therefore, they're similar. But on the gathering of a fast day does not count because that's a day that you're actually allowed to go to work. And even according to Chanina ben Akavia, the Amar le'asr ela b'yardin u'b'sfina k'maisa shahaya. This concept is from Rabbi Chanina ben Akavia, who says that when there is an enactment as a response to a story, and if it's not a typical story that would happen, you don't really have to be concerned it's going to happen all the time. Therefore, they only made the enactment to not do it in commemoration or in recognition of that particular occurrence, and therefore it's only on things that are exactly similar to that occurrence. The case that he's talking about is that they brought the red heifer water which is very expensive and very hard to get. To find a red heifer that doesn't have any black hairs and had been raised properly and never had a yoke on it, never did any work, and to be brought properly, and they were bringing the red heifer water on a boat across the Jordan River. And when they got to the other side, they realized that there was a dead sheretz in the boat, and it made the red heifer water tummy. So they said, no longer can you bring the red heifer water across the Jordan that way. But the Chachamim say you can't do it in any waters, you can't bring them across any bridges or boats. However, Rabbi Chanina ben Akavia, he says, no, it's only particularly the Jordan River and only on a boat, and exactly the way it was in that story. So Hanimili Yard in the Shana Mashar Nahoris. That's the reason, is because the Jordan is different than other rivers that run through Eretz Yisrael. It is wider or deeper, but therefore it's specifically the Jordan. But Shabbos and Yantiv are too similar. They're really essentially the same thing. They both are a set time dedicated to service of Hashem and Isser Malacha, prohibition of work. Yantiv v'Shabbos ki adadi ninu. They're very much the same. The aim ben Yantiv l'Shabbos alo echel nefesh bavad, because the only distinction between Shabbos and Yantiv is echel nefesh, things that are needed for food. You're allowed to cook. Now, Tosa points out, even though that this wording is the wording that Beis Shammai uses, Beis Hillel have a broader distinction because on Yantif, not only are you allowed to make things that are needed for food, but anything even not for the necessity of food, it's permissible. Even once it was permitted, it's permitted. Ahoyel tells us it's permitted in a broader sense, but obviously the prohibitions still apply, and it pertains to a need of Yantiv, and therefore it's the same idea, and that's where this enactment of not using the pegged sandal is only on Shabbos and Yantiv. So first distinction, it's only if it's made, that's what's holding the shoe together, the sandal together. But if these pegs are there as a piece of jewelry, as a part of the design, as adorning the shoe, that's permissible. But how much is permissible? What counts as making the shoe nice? So Rabbi Yochanan says 5. Five on each shoe. Rabbi Chanina says 7 on each shoe. Rabbi Yochanan says, Rav Shaman bar Abba, I'll explain it to you this way. 2 and on the right side of the shoe, 1 towards the toe, 1 towards the heel, and 2 on the left side of the foot of the sandal, 1 towards the toe and 1 towards the shoe, and 1 where the upper part, the connecting part, connects to the sole. The Rabbi Yochanan says, and I'll explain to you what Rabbi Chanina is saying. He says that you can have 3 on each side and 1 that connects the upper part. So Mesa we ask a contradiction. Sandal anoite Rabbi Nassim. Rabbi Nassim says that if you have a heel, a sandal, that the heel was not cut properly and it's thinner, the sole is thinner on one side than the other, and so your foot is twisting, your ankle's twisting on account of that your foot's not straight. So you're allowed to make 7 because you're allowed to put extra on one side to level out the sole by putting these pegs. Rabbi Matir and Rebbe says in Biyud Gimel, you can even put 13 on. So Bishlam and Rabbi Chanina, so Rabbi Chanina makes sense. Udamak Rabbi Nassim, he follows the opinion of Rabbi Nassim. They can have 7. Elo Rabbi Yochanan limits it to 5. Dama Kaman, whose opinion is he following? Rebbe says 13. Rabbi Nassim says 7, and Rabbi Yochanan is saying 5. Where is that coming? So Huda Amar Rabbi Naharai, he follows the opinion of Rabbi Naharai, which is in a brisa. The title of Rabbi Naharai Omer, Hey Mutter v'Sheva Aser. 5 are permissible, 7 are prohibited. Amalei Eifa, and so Eifa said to Rabbi Bar Bachana, Atun Talmidei to Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Bar Bachana, you come from Eretz Yisrael. You are students of Rabbi Yochanan. So you have to follow Rabbi Yochanan, Avidik Rabbi Yochanan. Anan Navid Rabbi Chanina. But we are of Bavel, we can follow the opinion of Rabbi Chanina, and we can do 7. Rav Huna or Rav Ashi. Rav Huna would not have asked Rav Ashi, so it's either Rav Asi or Rav Ami, or it's a different Rav Huna, a later Rav Huna, which was Rav Huna, which would be Rav Huna, the son of Bar Nassan, Rav Huna Bar Nassan. Chomesh Mao. What's the halacha with 5? Can I have 5 pegs in my shoe, in my sandal? Amalei afila zayin mutar. Even a 7 is mutar. In other words, we follow Rabbi Chanina that you can have 7. What about 9? Tesmai. Amalei afila chesas. No, 8 is already, even 8 is already too much. Rabbi Ami. This shoemaker asked Rabbi Ami, Tafra mebefnim Mao. If he sews the shoe inward, it puts a layer on top and he sews it into the sole, like our shoes seem to be done today. What would be the halacha? Amalei mutter. it's permissible to have these pegs on it. V'leyadana, but I don't know why. My time, I don't know why. Amar Rav Ashi, again, if this is a question asked to Rabbi Ami, it would not be Rav Ashi, probably Rav Asi. So Amar Rav Asi, Yadamar, my time, you don't know the reason? He says, Kivan the tafrim and b'fnim havali minol. If once you've have the upper part sewn in, another piece of leather sewn in to the bottom of the sole, now it's a shoe, it's not a sandal. B'sandal gazer be'rabanan, b'minol gazer be'rabanan. In a sandal, there's an enactment to prohibit it. With a minol, with a shoe, they didn't prohibit it. I want to stop here before we go on to more of these cases with this concept. Chachamim made enactments on common occurrences when people are likely to make mistakes and compare one thing to another. So, for instance, carrying. In a public domain, in order for it to count as a public domain, there are a lot of rules. But we think of any public right-of-way as a public domain. A courtyard that services 3-4 houses can be a public domain. A private alleyway, even though that it's halachically not a public domain, we consider it a public domain because people walk through it. So the Chachamim made an enactment. And they said anything that doesn't have walls like a private domain and is not servicing a private group that have their own meal as a private domain, you can't carry it. So that's the halachas of Eruv and the prohibitions, the Rabbanan of carrying in a carmelis. So that enactment is based upon a common occurrence of people mistaking one thing for another, and in order to avoid that, the Chachamim gave a certain thing the rule of the Deoraisa, of the biblical prohibition. So that's one type of Takana Gzeres Rabbanan. There are some things that were based on occurrences that happen. When that's not so common to happen, nevertheless, a tragedy happened, a mistake happened. So something needs to be done to change that, but you don't have to make a broad-based enactment because it's not a likely thing to happen again, but something did happen. So they enacted it in a very narrow sense to the particular case that happened. A sandal that had a lot of pegs on Shabbos. And that's in whether it's a commemoration or it's because it's a lesson learned, it'll show some special care. Either way, it's an enactment that happens to that particular case, and it's not broad-based. Whereas most other things, where there's an enactment, we say, Lo plug Rabbanan, Chachamim made an enactment, it applies to everything equally. Here, because it's not a common thing to happen, but it's only on account of something dangerous, or some tragedy, or something difficult that happened, it is only in the occurrence and in the exact manner within which it happened. And therefore, the Chachamim makes these distinctions. Only on Shabbos and Yantiv, not on a weekday, only with a particular amount of pegs, only in a particular type of shoe, a sandal, not a shoe. So, Rabbi Abba Rabbi Abba Baravina, Asoka min kalbus mal. What happens if they are a horseshoe-like? So their peg are a horseshoe-like. Amalei mutter, it's going to be permissible because that's not the manner within which the story happened. The story happened with pegs coming out of the shoe, out of a sandal. It manami amar Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Chanina Asoka min kalbus mutter. If it was made like this kalbus, this horseshoe peg, it's going to be permissible. If you protected the entire sole by putting a bunch of nails through it so that the sole doesn't sit on the ground, essentially you made taps, but you made taps not only at the tip of the shoe and the heel of the shoe, but the entire sole basically has these pegs sticking out as a way to protect the sole. It's also going to be permissible. Tanya Kavasir of Sheshus, and we have a concurring Bryce of Sheshus, La Yetze Ish Besadal Masumar, a man should not walk out with a peg shoe, a sandal. And you can't even go from one room to another, even from one bed to another with it. I say, but you're allowed to move it. It's not a muksa item. In other words, it is a vessel. It does have a function, but you can't wear it on Shabbos. So what can you do with it? You can handle it to cover a vessel. You can put it on top of a jug to seal it, to cover it. As a cleave, by karamita, or if the legs of your bed are wobbly, you can put it underneath one of the beds in order to stabilize it. But Rabbi Tzvi Fischer says, no, you're not allowed to handle it on Shabbos because maybe you're going to wear it. And we'll see later, the Gemara is going to say that Allah is not like it. If most of the pegs fell out and all that's left are 4 or 5, we saw before, 5 are permissible, so then you're allowed to wear it. And Rebbe says, no, it's permissible even if 7 of the pegs remain. 7 of these nails remain. If you put a leather sole beneath it, and so you covered it, and then the pegs these nails are sticking out above, mutter. That's also permissible because it's different than the story. Also, come in kalvas, come in tas, come in yosei. If you flatten the screw the nails so that they're not just sticking out, they're more like a flat head nail, that's permissible. Come in yosei, or he pointed them, so now they're really pointy at the bottom. They're going to be permissible. Or if the entire bottom is made of these nails or pegs, it's all going to be permissible because these are not the manner within which that story happened. If you put the entire bottom with these pegs in order so that it doesn't get the sole doesn't get eaten up, mutter, it's going to be permissible. Gemara now analyzes this brisa that said at first if it's prohibited unless the pegs fall out. So he said if most of the pegs fall out, then it's going to be permissible. Which indicates even if you have many left, but you had 30 to start with, and 16 fell out, you have 14 left, it's going to be permissible. And we had no such opinion before. And then the brisa itself says, if all that's left 4 or 5, it's going to be permissible. Wait, you just said majority fell out. That means minority remaining is going to be permissible even if it's more than 5. It depends if they completely came out, and then you can't tell that there ever were more, versus if they are partially out, and therefore they're no longer protruding on the underside, but you can tell they're there, so it's going to depend. If you can tell that there were more, so then it's going to be permissible to even with more than just 5, because you can tell there used to be 30, and now you only have 13, 14 sticking out. So it's permissible because people can tell that the majority of them are started to come out. Whereas if the entire peg came out, so now you can't tell whether or not there used to be more. And so then it's only going to be permissible if there are 5 or less. So Gemara analyzes it, says, wait, why do you say 4 or 5? If it's 5, for sure 4 is permissible. If 5 are left, that makes it permissible. 4 remaining is for sure permissible. What we're talking about is 5 on a larger sandal, 4 on a smaller sandal. Tosfos goes through various cases where we say that this was just people. It's the way people talk, 4 or 5, even though they mean 5, and where the halacha actually means 4 or 5, sometimes 4 and sometimes 5, as in this case, 4 for a smaller sandal, 5 for a larger sandal. Tomorrow we'll continue a little bit more about the sandal, where we have the difference between 7 and 13 and what the halacha is, and then we'll go on to the other type of shoes mentioned. Shakach.
Yashbach.